Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I always thought I'd die in the field. Maybe in a shootout. Maybe taking down some cartel leader in a raid gone wrong. But I never imagined I'd be running for my life from things that shouldn't exist. The outbreak started on a Wednesday. I remember that because I had just closed an investigation and was looking forward to a few days of rest. I was in D.C., working out of the field office, when we got an alert. A classified situation was unfolding at a research facility outside the city. The kind of alert that makes your gut tighten before you even know the details. My team and I were dispatched immediately. Black SUVs, full tactical gear, and orders to contain whatever was happening. We didn't ask questions. Not yet. When we arrived, the place was a nightmare. Security personnel lay motionless at the front gate. No gunfire, no sign of a struggle, just silence. Thick, suffocating silence. The facility's lights flickered in and out, and an emergency alarm droned in the distance. We moved in, weapons drawn. The bodies on the ground weren't just unconscious, they were wrong. Their skin looked grayish, and their eyes were open, unfocused. My partner, Agent Carter, bent down to check one of them. "Sir?" she called out, nudging the guard's shoulder. The man twitched. A second later, his hand shot up, grabbing her wrist with unnatural strength. "Get back!" I shouted, raising my rifle. But before I could fire, he lunged. His jaw snapped open wider than any human should, and his teeth clamped onto Carter's arm. She screamed as blood, her blood, streaked down her sleeve. I pulled the trigger. One shot to the head. The guard collapsed instantly, but it was already too late. Carter's breathing was ragged, her face pale. She clutched her arm, eyes wide with terror. "What? What was that?" she stammered. I didn't have an answer. We pressed forward, deeper into the facility, where the real horror was waiting. We moved fast. Carter's breathing was shallow, her hand clamped around the wound on her arm. I didn't say it, but we were both thinking the same thing. What if that bite wasn't just a bite? The deeper we went into the facility, the worse it got. The emergency lights bathed everything in a flickering red glow, casting long, jagged shadows on the walls. We passed offices where chairs were overturned, desks were splattered with something dark, and computer screens still displayed half-written emails. It looked like everyone had left in a hurry, or hadn't made it out at all. Then we found the security room. The monitors showed grainy, black and white footage from across the facility. The upper floors were a mess. Bodies littered the hallways, some unmoving, others twitching, but it was the lower levels that made my stomach turn. I saw them. Not just one or two, but dozens. People, at least they used to be people, shambling through the corridors. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, like puppets with their strings half cut. Some were missing chunks of flesh. Others had gaping wounds, yet they moved like they didn't even notice. Carter let out a shaky breath. "We need to get out of here, now." She was right. This wasn't a hostage situation. This wasn't a terrorist attack. This was something else entirely. I grabbed a radio from the desk and tried to call for backup. Static, not even a broken signal, just complete dead air. Either something was jamming us, or there was no one left to respond. Then a sound from the hallway. A dragging, scraping noise. I turned just as something lurched into view. It had been a scientist, lab coat still clinging to its thin frame, but its face was wrong. The skin sagged, the eyes were clouded over, and its mouth hung open as if it had forgotten how to close it. Then it moved. fast. I barely got my rifle up before it was on me, clawing at my vest. Its strength was unreal, nothing like the frail scientist it used to be. I shoved it back and fired a single round through the skull. It collapsed instantly, twitching on the floor before going still. Carter cursed under her breath, clutching her arm tighter. "We can't fight all of them," she said. She was right. We had to find another way out. But before we could even catch our breath, the monitors flickered again. This time, something new appeared on the screen. Something worse. There, deep in the lower levels, a door had opened, and whatever was behind it was coming out. I don't know what I expected to see on that screen, but it wasn't that. The lower levels were supposed to be locked down. Solid steel doors, security checkpoints, the kind of precautions you'd use to keep something dangerous inside. But on the grainy monitor, I saw the thick reinforced door sliding open, releasing whatever had been trapped down there. The lights in that corridor barely worked, flickering just enough to show glimpses of movement. Shadows. Something big, not like the others. Then the feed cut to static. A deep chill settled in my gut. "We're leaving." "Now," I said, already moving. Carter stumbled slightly as she followed. I could tell the bite was getting to her. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her breathing had turned ragged. But we didn't have time to stop. We retraced our steps, past the bodies, past the empty offices, back toward the main entrance. I could see the glass doors ahead, but something was wrong. The security shutters had come down, blocking the exit. I tried the panel next to the door, dead. No power. Then, from the hall behind us came the sound I was dreading. Footsteps, but not normal ones. A rapid skittering shuffle. I turned, rifle raised, and saw it. The scientist I had shot was moving again. It shouldn't have been. The bullet had gone straight through its skull, but here it was, twitching and convulsing as it struggled to its feet. Then, it snapped its head toward me. The thing let out a horrible, choking hiss and charged. I fired again, 3 shots to the chest. It didn't slow down. It leaped. I barely had time to react before it was on top of me, clawing, snarling. Up close, its face was worse than before. The skin around the bullet wound had closed like it had healed. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just some virus or infection. This was something else. Carter yanked her sidearm and fired at its head again. This time it dropped. No movement, no twitching, just stillness. I shoved the body off me and got to my feet. "Headshots don't always work," I muttered. Carter wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Fantastic." The radio on my vest crackled. For the first time since we arrived, I heard something other than static. A voice. Faint, broken by interference, but clear enough to understand. "Level 4, secure. Anyone alive? Repeat, anyone alive?" Someone else was still here. I grabbed the radio. "This is Agent Reeves, FBI. We're trapped near the main entrance. Who is this?" Static, then, "Survivors. Get to level 4, now." I glanced at Carter. She looked just as uneasy as I felt, but we didn't have a choice. If there was a way out, it wasn't through the front door. It was down. Going deeper into the facility felt like the worst possible idea, but we had no choice. Level 4. That was the only clue we had. And whoever was on the radio was the only living person we'd heard since this nightmare started. Carter's condition was worsening. She was shivering despite the sweat rolling down her face. Her skin had taken on a sickly pale color. I didn't say anything, but we both knew. The bite was doing something to her. We had to move fast. We reached the elevator bank, but power to the main lifts was dead. That left one option, the emergency stairwell. It was dark, barely lit by flickering red backup lights, and it smelled like metal and something else. Something rotten. We started descending. Level 2 was eerily quiet. No movement, no bodies. Just empty halls and abandoned workstations. It felt wrong, like something had cleared this place out. Then we hit level 3, and that's when we heard it. A low, deep, clicking noise. At first, I thought it was the building settling, but then it came again, click, click, click. It wasn't random, it was rhythmic, intentional. Carter gripped my arm, her breathing heavy. "What the hell is that?" she whispered. I shook my head. I didn't know, and I didn't want to find out. We pressed forward. Halfway down the level 3 hallway, we found a security door slightly ajar, light spilling through the gap. A survivor? I moved closer, pushing it open slowly. The room inside was a slaughterhouse. Bodies, not just human ones, were sprawled across the floor, torn apart. Scientists, security personnel, and something else. Something big. I took a cautious step forward, my boot sliding slightly in the blood. That's when I noticed the claw marks on the walls. Deep, jagged gashes in solid metal. Then Carter gasped. I turned just as something shifted in the far corner of the room. A figure, hunched, barely visible in the dim light. It wasn't like the others. It was taller, thinner, and its arms were too long. Then it lifted its head. Two sunken eyes locked onto me. And it clicked. I didn't think. I just grabbed Carter and ran. The thing moved fast, too fast. I heard it slam against the wall behind us, then the sound of claws scraping metal. We reached the stairwell and practically threw ourselves down to level 4. The second we hit the bottom, the security door beside us slammed open, and a hand yanked us inside. The door locked behind us. I spun around, gun raised. A man in a blood-stained lab coat stood before us, face lined with exhaustion and fear. "You shouldn't have come down here," he muttered. Outside, the clicking started again, and it was getting closer. The clicking sound on the other side of the door was steady, deliberate. I kept my rifle up, my finger hovering over the trigger, but the man in the lab coat held up a hand. "Don't," he whispered. "It can hear you. It can feel you." Carter collapsed against the wall, her breathing heavy. She looked worse, pale, her pupils dilated, sweat dripping down her temple. The scientist noticed, his expression darkened. "She's been bitten." I stepped between them. "Help her. Now." He hesitated. There's no cure." I pressed the barrel of my rifle against his chest. "Try." He swallowed hard and nodded. "Come with me." The hallway was dimly lit, but it was intact, no signs of destruction like the levels above. The walls were lined with the reinforced glass panels, revealing labs filled with equipment, most of it still functional. "Who are you?" I asked as we walked. "Dr. Elliot Grayson," he said. "I was part of the research team here, before the containment breach." Carter winced, gripping her arm tighter. "What the hell were you people doing down here?" Dr. Grayson hesitated. "Trying to control something we never should have touched." I clenched my jaw. "The infected upstairs, the ones that don't die when you shoot them in the head, what are they?" He exhaled slowly. "Not infected, changed." We turned a corner, approaching a locked lab door. Dr. Grayson pressed his keycard against the reader and the door slid open. Inside, monitors flickered with data. Tubes of strange dark liquid sat on metal trays, but what caught my eye was the large containment pod in the center of the room, cracked open. Dr. Grayson followed my gaze. It escaped 2 hours ago. A chill ran through me. What escaped? He turned to face me. The first one, the original. A deep, inhuman shriek echoed from the hallway. The clicking noise had stopped. Something was outside the door. Carter shivered violently, her breathing uneven. I turned to Dr. Grayson. Whatever you're going to do it now. The shriek outside the door sent a cold spike of fear through my chest. Something was waiting. Dr. Grayson rushed to a workstation, frantically typing commands into a terminal. I can slow the progression of the infection, he said, but I can't stop it. Carter let out a sharp breath, her fingers twitching. Her skin was deathly pale now. She was running out of time. Do it, I said. Grayson grabbed a syringe filled with a dark, viscous liquid and knelt beside Carter. This might hurt. She laughed weakly. I'm already in hell, Doc. He injected the serum into her arm. She convulsed, gasping as if she'd been shocked. Then, after a few agonizing seconds, her breathing slowed. Color returned, just slightly, to her skin. Grayson sat back. That'll hold it off. For now. I turned to him. And the thing outside? He clenched his jaw. That's what you should be worried about. A loud bang rattled the door. Then another. Then silence. My stomach twisted. I didn't like this. I raised my rifle, glancing at the vents, the ceiling, anywhere it could come from. Then the lights went out. Darkness swallowed us whole. Then I heard it, breathing, inside the room. I turned, pulse hammering, trying to pinpoint the sound. The emergency lights flickered back on, and I saw it. Hunched in the corner, watching us. It was tall, its limbs too long, its skin stretched thin over sharp bones. Its face was wrong, half-formed, like something caught between a human and something else entirely. The original. It moved fast. I fired. A burst of rounds hit its chest, but it didn't slow down. It was on me in seconds, its claws slicing across my vest, knocking me backward. Carter, still weak, fired her sidearm bullets ripping through its back. Grayson scrambled to the console, typing frantically. Then he shouted, "Get it into the chamber." I didn't have time to ask questions. I grabbed the thing, using its own momentum to shove it backward, straight into the cracked containment pod. Grayson slammed a button. The doors sealed shut. The creature screamed, a sound so unnatural it made my vision blur. The glass froze over instantly as if the air inside had dropped to sub-zero temperatures. Then, silence. Grayson exhaled shakily. That won't hold forever. I turned to Carter. She was still pale, but the shaking had stopped. She managed a weak smile. I'm not dead yet. I pulled her up, gripping my radio. Command, this is Agent Reeves. We need an extraction. Now. For the first time since we arrived, a voice responded. Copy that, Agent. Evac inbound. Hold your position. I didn't know if we'd truly survived, if this thing, the first one, was really contained. But for now, we were alive. And that was enough. For now. We didn't have time to celebrate. The thing inside the containment pod wasn't dead, just trapped. For now. Dr. Grayson was already at the terminal, sweat beading on his forehead. The lockdown protocol only gives us a few minutes. That thing, he gestured to the frozen glass where the creature's shadow still twitched, is adapting. If we don't leave, we're next. I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed Carter, looping an arm around her to keep her steady. Where's the evac point? Grayson swallowed hard. Loading bay, 2 levels down. I didn't like the sound of that. Every floor we descended brought us closer to whatever else was hiding in this facility, but we had no choice. The lights flickered again. Something pounded on the containment pod from the inside. Then we heard it, the clicking. Not from the pod, from the hallway. I spun toward the door, rifle raised. The emergency lights cast long shadows through the narrow corridor. At first, I saw nothing. Then movement. The silhouette was wrong. Too tall, too thin, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Another shape appeared beside it. Then another. Then 3 more. Carter tensed beside me. "You've got to be kidding me." Grayson's voice was a whisper. "They're here." The door slammed open. I fired the first shot. The muzzle flash lit up the hallway for a split second, revealing twisted, shifting faces, half human, half something else. Their eyes were nothing but deep, empty sockets. The first one dropped, but the others rushed forward. Carter fired, her bullets tearing through limbs and torsos, but it barely slowed them down. Grayson hit the security panel. "Go, now!" The emergency door slammed shut behind us as we bolted into the stairwell. The creatures screamed. The sound wasn't human. I could hear them clawing at the metal, the clicking growing louder. Grayson was already running. "They won't stop. They don't get tired. We have to..." Boom. Something slammed into the stairwell door from the other side, hard enough to dent the metal. Then again, the creatures weren't just strong, they were getting stronger. We ran. Level 5, Level 6. The walls here were different, reinforced, like they'd expected something to try and break out. Then we saw it. A massive set of blast doors at the end of the hallway. Beyond them, the loading bay, a way out. But the control panel next to the doors was smashed. I turned to Grayson. "Can you override it?" He hesitated. Maybe, but I need time." We didn't have time, because the creatures had found us. The stairwell door exploded inward, and they poured through. The creatures poured into the hallway, moving in jerky, unnatural bursts, like broken puppets on tangled strings. Their bodies were half-formed, shifting, reshaping as they advanced. The clicking sound was deafening now. Carter raised her sidearm and fired 1, 2, 3 shots. The bullets tore into the first creature's skull, but it didn't fall. Instead, its head snapped backward at an impossible angle, then righted itself. It kept coming. Grayson was already at the control panel, frantically rewiring circuits and bypassing security locks. I just need 30 seconds. We didn't have 30 seconds. I flipped my rifle to full auto and let loose a burst, aiming for legs and joints. The creatures stumbled, but they didn't stop. One of them lunged, too fast I barely had time to react before it slammed into me, knocking me to the ground. Claws raked across my vest, tearing fabric, scraping against armor. The thing's mouth opened too wide, unhinging like a snake's. Its breath reeked of rot and chemicals. I jammed my forearm into its throat and pushed, keeping it from biting down. Carter stepped in, planting her boot on its back and unloading 3 rounds into its skull at a point-blank range. This time, it stayed down. "Reeves, move!" I rolled to my feet just as 2 more creatures surged forward. One of them grabbed Carter, its fingers digging into her already injured arm. She screamed. Something inside me snapped. I slammed the stock of my rifle into the creature's head, grabbed Carter and dragged her backward. "Grayson, tell me you're done," I yelled. "Almost." He was sweating, fingers flying across the keypad. "I just need..." A new sound filled the air, not clicking. A deep, guttural roar. The creatures froze. For the first time, they hesitated. Then they turned, all of them, toward the corridor we had just come from. The air grew heavy. A slow, thudding sound echoed through the hall. Something was coming. Carter gritted her teeth. That's not good. Grayson let out a sharp breath. Doors are open, move. The blast doors groaned as they slid apart, revealing the loading bay beyond. A vast, empty space with a single transport truck idling. Its rear doors open. A rescue team. Our way out, we ran. Behind us, the hallway shook. The creatures weren't chasing us anymore. They were waiting for it. And as I turned for one last look, I saw a massive shadow emerge from the corridor. Twisting, growing, changing. And then the door slammed shut behind us. The blast doors slammed shut, cutting us off from whatever was lurking in that hallway. For a moment, there was only silence. Thick, heavy, suffocating. Then, the entire door shuddered, as if something on the other side had just slammed into it with bone-crushing force. Grayson stared at the shaking metal. That won't hold forever. I didn't need to be told twice. Go! I barked, grabbing Carter and practically hauling her toward the truck. The loading bay was massive, a cavernous space filled with abandoned vehicles and scattered debris. The only sign of life was the idling transport truck, its rear doors open, waiting for us. But something wasn't right. Where was the driver? The rescue team? Carter must have had the same thought. "You sure this is our ride?" she asked, panting. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. But I did know one thing. Staying here meant dying. I climbed into the truck first, sweeping my rifle over the dark interior. Empty, but the engine was running, meaning someone had been here recently. Grayson scrambled in behind me, dragging a barely conscious Carter with him. Then, from the front of the truck, a voice. "You shouldn't have come here." I snapped my rifle up. A man sat in the driver's seat, his hands gripping the wheel like his life depended on it. His face was shadowed by the dim lighting, but I could see the dark veins creeping up his neck. He was infected. Carter cursed. "Oh, come on." The driver's fingers tightened. His breathing was ragged, wet, like his lungs were filling with fluid. He turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see the military insignia on his jacket. "You don't get it, do you?" he rasped. "It's not about escaping." A deep, metallic groan filled the bay. I turned. The blast doors, the ones that had just saved us, were starting to bend outward. Something on the other side was pushing through. The driver let out a wet, choking laugh. "You're already dead." I raised my rifle. "Drive, now." He stared at me, unblinking. Then he grinned and slammed his foot on the gas. The truck lurched forward, tires screeching against the concrete. Behind us, the doors finally gave in. And the thing that stepped through was not human. I didn't get a good look. I didn't want to. I only saw the size, the sheer, towering mass of the thing, its limbs wrong, its shape shifting like it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Then we were gone, tearing out of the facility and into the open world beyond. But I couldn't shake the feeling. We hadn't escaped. We'd just brought something with us. The truck barreled through the facility's perimeter gates, crashing onto the open highway. The road stretched ahead, empty, lifeless. The city skyline loomed in the distance, dark, silent, waiting. None of us spoke. I kept my rifle aimed at the driver. His breath came in ragged gasps, his grip on the wheel twitching. "How much time do you have?" I asked. He laughed, a hollow, wet sound. "Not long." Carter groaned in the back, clutching her injured arm. She was pale, barely hanging on. Grayson was beside her, checking the last of his supplies. There was nothing left to help her. I turned back to the driver. "Pull over." His grip tightened. "You don't get it, do you?" His voice was lower now, thick with something inhuman. This isn't just in that facility, it's already out. My stomach dropped. What? The driver's head lolled to the side, his eyes dark, unfocused. You think this is about one lab, one outbreak? He coughed violently, shaking. It's everywhere. They made sure of that. Carter forced herself up. Who? The ones who started it, the driver whispered. You think you're the heroes? You're just the last ones to figure it out. His hand jerked toward something on his belt. A detonator. I fired. The bullet hit his shoulder, sending him sprawling against the wheel. The truck swerved, tires screaming against the pavement. Then impact. Metal crunched. My body lurched forward. A sickening weightlessness before the world flipped upside down. And then darkness. I came to in the wreckage. The truck lay on its side, smoke curling from the crumpled hood. The windshield was shattered. Distant sirens wailed. I forced myself up, ignoring the pain screaming through my ribs. Carter was next to me, still breathing. Grayson groaned somewhere nearby. The driver? Gone. Not dead, just missing. I stumbled to my feet, heart hammering. Then I saw them. People. Not the creatures from the lab, not twisted, clicking things. Just people. Standing on the sidewalk, in doorways, in the street, watching. Their eyes were wrong. Dark, empty, waiting. A terrible realization crawled up my spine. The driver was right. It wasn't just in the lab. It was already here. And then the streetlights flickered. The clicking began. And the city woke up. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.